The Memory of Love, Chapter 40. In the sack carried over his shoulder, he had a loaf of stale bread, some onions, a piece of meat wrapped in paper. A man stopped and asked him for food. Kai shook his head, but the man persisted and reached out to touch Kai. The touch made Kai angry. He knocked the man's hand away, but the man would not be deterred and touched him again. Kai turned around to confront him and saw it was the soldier from the hospital. Unmistakably, from the nature of his injury, part of the man's face was missing. Most of the lower jaw had been blasted away, leaving the roof of his mouth and teeth exposed. He was in the country serving with the foreign task force. Kai had found him sitting on the floor of the hospital corridor, next to a 3-hour-old corpse and a pool of oily, blackened blood, lucid still and in remarkably good spirits, believing himself saved. Kai knew he was going to die, but something was wrong. What was he doing here? Kai could see the huge tongue flapping obscenely as the man tried to talk to him. Kai understood he was hungry and asking for food. Kai did not want to give him any, but the ruined face loomed in front of him. He swung the sack from his shoulder and bent to open it. But when he looked up, the man was sauntering away down the road, whistling an Elvis song. Kai began to run. Suddenly, the man was behind him, following him, gaining on him in great bounds. In a moment, he would catch him. Kai needed to reach Neneba's house, but he did not want to lead the freakish man there, so he switched direction. Running was becoming hard work. To make his legs move required every fiber of his being. Despite himself, he was slowing. He felt the man gaining on him, and there, ahead of them both, the bridge road, long and empty. The man had overtaken him and was running straight for it. "Stop!" Kai wanted to shout. The man kept on going, Kai behind him. They were on the bridge now. Kai could not see to the end, only the soldier ahead of him. The bridge began to break up. He couldn't keep his footing. He felt himself falling. He opened his mouth to scream, but the force of the wind knocked the air out of his lungs. He wakes with a start. He is sitting on a chair in the staff room. Around the coffee table, 3 doctors and a nurse are talking between themselves. At the computer, Seligman works and whistles "Love Me Tender." Kai sits still. His breathing is heavy. His armpits damp. Sweat trickles down his neck. He looks to see if he has been observed, but his other colleagues continue talking between themselves. He waits another minute, then goes to the bathroom and splashes water on his face. Cupping his hand under the tap, he drinks. He looks at his face in the mirror and thinks of Neneba. Throughout the second invasion, he had acted as a lifeline to the household. As a doctor, he was given transport and protection. He used his influence to acquire small amounts of food. The city was split into 2, one side under rebel control, the other side under the control of the government, troops and task force. A bridge divided the city, though not the one from his dream. This one spanned the east of the city to the west. The besieged residents of the west were trapped by the rebel army on one side, the sea and mountains on the other side. Kai leaves the staff room and crosses the quad towards Adrian's apartment. A light rain is falling, dampening the heat. He has set aside this afternoon to advance his application to work in the US. Despite Tejani's assurances, the quantity of paperwork is daunting. References, certified copies of degree and other medical qualifications. His birth certificate. The records offices in town had been looted and burned, adding to the challenge. He is also required to undergo a full medical. This should be easy enough to arrange, except that Kai hasn't yet told anyone at the hospital of his plans. The same goes for references. Who should he ask? Seligman? To do so would seem like a betrayal. He ponders matters as he walks down the corridor towards a flat. At home, 2 evenings ago, Kai had been sitting studying some of the forms Abbas had come in, tired from playing, and laying legs and arms draped across the back of the sofa, his chin resting on Kai's shoulder. From there, he read the paper in Kai's hand and asked in a loud, inquiring voice, "What's the Department of Immigration?" Kai felt his cousin's quick glance as she looked up from her book. "Do you know how rude it is to read over another person's shoulder?" he said to Abbas, placing the papers face down on the coffee table. He hauled the child off the back of the sofa and began to tickle him, felt his cousin's covert gaze upon them both. Inside the empty apartment, Kai sits on the cane sofa and places the envelope of papers before him. He fetches himself a glass of water from the kitchen, sorts the papers into a single pile, and begins to read through them. For 10 minutes, he works in this way, before getting up to turn on the fan. The rain, as it does so often, has brought only temporary relief, clearing the clouds away only for the sun's rays to shine through more strongly. Kai hasn't seen Adrian in weeks now. Work at the mental hospital must be keeping him busy. Kai has not even managed to tell him of his return trip to Agnes's hometown. He must do so. In the days following the visit, Kai had thought a lot about the woman's story. He did not dwell on the more gruesome facts, for atrocities such as these were the facts of war. He'd administered to the consequences of them often enough. In Agnes's case, it was the unbearable aftermath, the knowledge and nothing to be done but to endure it. For a while, Kai had dreamt even more than was usual, and though they were his dreams, his own experiences to him, they were in some way connected to Agnes. On the table, a reference book belonging to Adrian. Kai picks it up and it falls open in the place where the spine is broken. Idly, he turns the book over to read the title, A History of Mental Illness. Kai returns to the text and reads, guided by Adrian's markings and annotations, at first casually and then with greater intensity. Fugue, characterized by sudden unexpected travel away from home, irresistible wandering, often coupled with subsequent amnesia, a rarely diagnosed dissociative condition in which the mind creates an alternative state. This state may be considered a place of safety, a refuge. During his life as a surgeon, Kai has seen people arrive at the hospital with terrible injuries, wounds that would seem to defy their ability to retain consciousness, let alone walk or talk. Once during the war, he and the other hospital staff had been called outside to attend the passengers of a truck that had arrived from the provinces. The first person Kai helped down from the tailgate was a woman, both of whose hands were almost entirely severed. They flapped from her wrists like broken wings. He'd seen a man hopping, clutching his own amputated foot in both hands. There were dozens of them, men, women, children. Some had survived for days in the bush. In the theater, Kai worked harder, faster, and more furiously than he had ever done in his life. And afterwards, if you had asked any of the survivors how they had managed it, they would not have been able to tell you. It was as if those days in the forest, the escape to the city, had passed in a trance. The mind creates an alternative state. Kai thinks of the conversation with Adrian here in the kitchen, the evening after Adrian had been attacked by Jaja. Kai had presumed Jaja to be a common hoodlum, a drug smuggler. He'd understood little about Agnes's sickness, except what Adrian had told him. Adrian said Agnes's journeys, the kind of journeys described in the book, were made because she was looking for something. But Agnes isn't searching for anything. She is fleeing something. She is running away from intolerable circumstances, escaping the house, her daughter, most of all, escaping Jaja. The difference between Agnes and the injured people who arrived at the hospital is that, for Agnes, There is no possibility of sanctuary. Kai replaces the book on the table. He must talk to Adrian. Adrian deserves to know whatever comes next. If anything, it's for the future. He will wait here for Adrian. He looks at his watch. 2:30. Suddenly, he is exhausted. He stretches out on the sofa and within minutes is asleep. Images pass in front of his eyelids. A waste of burnt buildings, of flailing limbs, sometimes for day walking and smiling. Other times, people, those from the truck, without hands and feet. Balia, the young nurse, smiling shyly at him. In his ears, the chatter of the man with his jaw missing. There is no coherence, nothing that amounts to a nightmare, just a record of images that flow before him.